I once had a fellow call me from Mount Shasta who doesn't have internet, doesn't have a telephone. He came down the mountain, used a payphone to call me because he kept getting my phone number during his meditation. I've had people reach out
Really?
from Europe who sensed they were to work with someone from Kelowna. And I had just moved there, so I was like 6 pages down on Google. But they found me because they knew it was me they're supposed to work with. There's a karmic bond between us and the people we're here to serve. So we can think of the world as happening to us or realize it's generated from our consciousness. So everyone we meet, everything we experience within and without the body are a reflection of our own consciousness that the universe is giving us so we can wake up. And what are we really all here to do in this lifetime but wake up before we die?
Thanks so much, Bonita, for being here today.
Thank you, Vanessa. It's good to see you again.
And I've got some things that I want to just talk to you about, but for our viewers who aren't familiar with your work, I'd love to just have you tell the people what you do, how you help people as a psychic life and business coach, and then we can go from there.
Sure. So I've been at this for over 40 years. I was born into a psychic family. So as a child, I would have visions and hear voices and didn't know that wasn't normal till I went to school. Um, and I eventually became a crisis worker and suicide interventionist. I was working on a phone line. But even before that, at 18, I started doing readings and I really loved that it could help people. So I got that background later on in life, and it's been very useful because basically people can come to me with absolutely anything and I can hold space for it. And over the last more than 40 years I've been doing this, I don't think there's any stories I haven't heard. Nothing shocks me. I can hold space for anything without judgment because we're all just divine beings having a human experience, and those experiences are varied and unique. My primary work as a psychic coach isn't to foretell the future, even though I do work with tarot and I can see the chakras and I can tune in as an empath. It's to see the future your patterns are creating, those core patterns that have been operating since you were a little kid, and give you ways to access those patterns and bring them to consciousness. So if the future I'm seeing for you isn't going in a good direction, I can help you shift so that you do move the direction your soul intended coming into this life before you got all that conditioned thinking.
So, how did you get into actually coaching people?
I think it's because from the time I started doing readings, people were having emotional reactions to things. And I grew up reading Ann Landers. So you might be too young to know who that is, but she used to write an advice column. And her and Dear Abby, they were actually sisters who both wrote advice columns. So I used to read those voraciously. And I always thought how wonderful it would be to be able to give people advice that helps them in their lives. So what I noticed is I would be getting information on people by doing the readings because the cards would only tell me so much. That's where the psychic ability kicks in. I would be getting more information than the cards were providing. And that information would be useful as guidance. So if I had somebody come to me and I'm going back, gosh, almost to 18, chatting with somebody who's dated all the bad boys and has this really great friend who's really awesome and doesn't see him as anything more than a friend. And then one day has this awakening and then is saying, is this the person I'm supposed to be with? And we're talking about their patterns. Like, well, you've always been attracted to the guys who break your heart. So of course you're not attracted to the one who won't, but you're starting to be because you're changing. And basically my advice was go with this. And they fell madly in love, happy ever after, kids, the whole shebang. But sometimes what people need when they come to see me is validation. Basically, my role is to hold up a mirror to their intuition. And I get a lot of people who buy my packages and do ongoing work with me because I always say that the more you see me, the less you'll need me because I'll teach you how to be your own psychic. Ultimately, it's about learning how to hear and trust your own inner wisdom. So that's where I'm operating from.
I like that. And you said you actually mentioned in your in your videos that I've watched that everyone is psychic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Here's how I look at it. And this is actually in the chapter in my book. I have a book on my website, Take Back Your Power. I have one chapter in the book. I liked the concept of people getting over their people pleasing pattern. So I contributed a chapter. And it's the idea that we come into this world, this expansive, loving awareness, this soul who knows it's come here to learn certain lessons and make a certain contribution to the world. And I believe we're born to the parents who plant the seeds for the things we came to work on in this lifetime. So, well meaning parents, teachers, society are going to project on us certain ideas about who we can and can't be, do, and have. And because we're trying to fit in and belong, we buy into those ideas and we shelve all the parts of us that don't fit that paradigm, and it becomes our shadow. So we learn to stop hearing and trusting ourselves if it doesn't work in our family environment. So if you're, say, a psychic little kid and you say to mom, why does Uncle Joe have a red cloud around his head? And you get told, oh, don't be so silly. Or, oh, you're such a storyteller. You're looking to them to tell you what reality is. So now you're going to go, oh, I must not be seeing things as they really are. And we start to shut down our abilities because we're looking to the people in our lives to tell us this is real and this is not. Because I grew up in a psychic family, I'd run downstairs and go, Mom, I heard the voices again. And she'd be like, that's nice, dear, because she heard them too. So it was normalized for me. So I never lost my abilities. And over the years, I developed them more and more. We all start off with a certain psychic vocabulary, like maybe, for example, you get a sense when the phone rings who's on the other end. So that's a certain clairsentience. Clairvoyance is you get visions. Clairaudience is you hear voices in your head. Clairsentience can also be you feel things physically with your hands or with your being. So what I do with people who want to learn is I start them off with their natural vocabulary and help them learn to trust that more. And then I help them expand on it. In fact, at my office in Nanaimo on October 27th, I have a workshop coming up where I'm going to be putting out over 50 Oracle and Tarot decks and teaching people really easy, intuitive ways to give each other readings. So you're going to come away knowing how to do that and having had some insights because you get to give and get readings throughout the morning. We are naturally psychic. We're naturally intuitive. It's just learning to get out of our own way and trust that again.
What a cool upbringing to be in a psychic family where those things are normalized. I've just started kind of more publicly sharing about my clairvoyance and clairsentience, and it's felt like a huge step for me to kind of start sharing that because it's always been a huge part of who I am, but I've hidden it. And you brought up the shadow, and that was in your newsletter that I read this morning too.
Yeah.
So could you maybe expand a bit on the shadow? Because I think that the shadow gets a bad rap, but it's not so much scary. It's just kind of the things that you've hidden away, hey?
Yeah, and I'm giving a talk on Thursday about that as well. And all that stuff's on my website for anybody who wants to have a look. So imagine that you are this flamboyant, boisterous, creative little kid in a really, really quiet family. And you're taught, shh, be quiet, be a lady, dumb it down. So, right?
Yeah.
So you take all that beautiful flamboyant energy and you put it on a shelf. And at first, we develop the id, which is really a bundle of ideas about who we're supposed to be based on what we were told. And after a while, we identify with that little bundle of ideas, which may have very little to do with who we actually are. So the rest of our life, we can learn how to reclaim those parts, integrate them, and bring them to consciousness. So when you start to bring that flamboyance up, you'll probably have a shame pattern that will come up and go, whoa, not supposed to do that. That's wrong. So the shadow work is, here's what we do. We don't let up the flamboyance so we won't experience the shame pattern. And what we have to do is let up the flamboyance and then face the shame pattern so they can both heal. The flamboyance can find out that it's safe to be up now, and the shame pattern can learn it no longer has to protect you from punishment or disdain by running the way that it does. So for example, in my case, I've always loved to dance. And I used to go to a bar in Kelowna by myself, show up, I'd get out on the dance floor. Invariably, people would join me. I'd have a wonderful time, and I'd go home and beat myself up for it. Oh my God, you're such a show off. Who do you think you are? So I kept dancing. And I would say to the part, okay, you're coming up about this. At what point in the evening did anybody show any discomfort or concern about what I was doing? And that part got to go, well, nobody. So eventually it becomes a conscious part of you that just lets you know, in this situation, you might want to show a different aspect of yourself, but it no longer shuts you down for things that are appropriate in those situations. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for explaining it this way, because I feel like that's what I've really been going through is like, especially now with kind of starting to share this very personal part of myself online. I share a bit, and then it's like, oh, you shouldn't have done that. Maybe you should take it down. Maybe delete that video. People are gonna
It's
think
so
you're weird.
vulnerable. It's so vulnerable, right? But you know what I've discovered over the years? I actually used to run a group back in Kingston, Ontario, because I had so many people coming to me who were starting to have psychic experiences and were absolutely convinced they were crazy. So they'd come to see me and they'd be like, please tell me I'm not crazy. No, you're just a textbook awakening psychic. So I started holding these groups so they could meet each other. They could find out they were crazy. Because when you don't have that tribe around you that where this is just normal, and you live in a society that kind of dumbs that stuff down, it is scary. And so, Vanessa, I totally applaud you for putting yourself out there. And because here's how I see it. If you communicate, this is a part of me, you make it okay for other people to do the same. And maybe we all come out of hiding. So I think doing so is really important. And it's realizing if somebody has a negative reaction, it might be fear-based. To give you an example, back when I was in Kelowna, I got this nasty Google review, and you can actually tap on the person's name and see who else they've given reviews to. I'd never seen this person, so I thought, what's this about? He'd done the same thing to 4 other psychics that night. And they all wrote this like, oh my God, how could you say that? Blah, 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 blah. And I sat with it, and my response was, since we've never met, clearly you have an opinion about psychics. I'd be happy to meet with you and discuss how I work so you have a better understanding of this process. Of course, I never heard from him, but it's realizing people are coming from fear, and attacking them is just going to close them off even more. In fact, one of the biggest things about our shadow is we suppress so much of ourselves. Females, for example, are often taught to suppress their anger from a young age. And here's what I've discovered about that. If you suppress your anger, you're probably lousy at setting boundaries, not so good at charging what you're worth, or you charge it and you work, like I'll often say to my coaching clients, my business clients, so how many times do you charge for an hour, but you work for an hour and a half? And they kind of look at me sheepishly like, yeah, that's suppressed anger. Anger is the energy of action. It's the part of you that says you got to stand up, speak up, show up. You need to set something here. You need to do something about this. So when we suppress our anger, we're suppressing a part of ourselves that when it's conscious, simply says things like, waiter, that's not what I ordered. You can't speak to me like that. I need you to do this now. It's just clarity. But because we don't catch it when it's just irritation and suppress it, it will eventually come out as a blast. And then we think we have this monster inside of us that we could never dare show the world. But your anger, your fear, your shame, your pain are all valid parts of you that deserve to be part of your life. And when brought to consciousness, become joyful, constructive parts of you. And they give you more energy, and they have some of your wisdom. So there's more of you sitting around the table weighing in on your decision making. I mean, at 61, I would say I probably have the energy of a 30 or 40-year-old because I've spent decades liberating these parts of me, because it takes a lot of energy to hold them down. So you want the fountain of youth? Dig in there and do the shadow work.
It's amazing how much energy it takes to keep all of that suppressed.
And that's why we also get some diseases. I don't want to make a blanket statement about it, but I have worked with a lot of cancer patients, people with other conditions. And a lot of times there's a corollary between growing a tumor and suppressed emotion. Because the body goes, oh, you don't want to feel that feeling? Okay, we will just physically represent it for you because it exists. And so sometimes part of the healing process can be work on the emotional state and bring that to consciousness and learn to be present with all of your feelings so your body can come back into a state of ease and alignment. It's not always going to cure an illness, but it sure as heck can help you deal with it better, because most of the time we're adding pain to our pain by not allowing ourselves to have the feelings we have.
Totally. I have actually a bit of a testimony that's in line with that to show how much our bodies do hold on to stuff. So, because I wrote a book about how to stop people pleasing, because I had suppressed so much anger, and I was textbook everything that you mentioned, no boundaries, undercharging, overworking, all of this, and I ended up with ovarian cysts that were quite painful.
Oh, yeah.
And when I started, the more I did of the shadow work and like actually letting the anger come up and processing it, my cysts actually started to shrink. I had scans that actually showed the progression of these cysts actually shrinking as I was doing this work. It was like mind-boggling. Now they're pretty much gone.
Fantastic.
Yeah, but it's amazing how our bodies respond to, well, it's all connected. It's all energy,
Yeah.
right?
Well, yeah, you are an energy field. Your body's just the slowest moving part of the field. We are walking fields of information. So when we don't process something, the body will scream at us. Back in 2021, I was diagnosed with a disease, and I've posted about this on my blog as well. Disease is a wonderful teacher. So I got diagnosed with something rare called sarcoidosis, and it is incurable. It can kill you. Most people can live long, relatively healthy lives with it, but it affects everybody differently. So it's these growths that can grow in any part of the body. And in my case, and this is super cool, they grew in the lymph nodes around my heart. I literally had a wall around my heart. And I had done all this work on all my chakras, but I couldn't get to this particular blind spot no matter what I did. So my body went, okay, well, we're going to give you, a literal depiction of what that is. And, I did all the things the doctors told me to do. I don't believe in not listening to your doctor, but I started working on it internally as well. And now it's a lot better than it was. It might always be there to some degree, which is always a good reminder. It might flare up at some point, which means there's more work to be done. But after doing that work, I met the love of my life. So I'm grateful for my disease because it set me up to do the work to meet my husband.
Oh, and happy anniversary, by the way. I saw
Thank
that
you.
on your, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. So we can either go, why me, to the things that life throws at us, or we can recognize we live in a quantum universe. It's literally a manifestation of our consciousness. This is the matrix. So we can think of the world as happening to us or realize it's generated from our consciousness. So everyone we meet, everything we experience within and without the body are a reflection of our own consciousness that the universe is giving us so we can wake up. And what are we really all here to do in this lifetime? But wake up before we die and wake up more in the next life and the next life. So if we see everything as the universe cooperating to give us exactly what we need to awaken and follow our spiritual path, we don't get into why me. We don't go into victim mode. Maybe we have a little pity party, but then we can do the work. Little pity party.
Yeah.
That's just acknowledging the parts of us that go, this sucks, And you have to acknowledge that part so that it's also part of the energy of doing the work, right?
For sure. I love it. Oh man. It's a mini pity party.
Yeah. And I think that is important. It's like I had one day back when my kids were young where in like an hour I got 3 pieces of bad news. And so I sat there I said, okay, I'm going to give myself a little bit of time to cry, to acknowledge this, just to feel all the feels. And then at the end of that, I think I gave myself a couple hours and I said, okay, now what am I going to do about this? What's my next step? So by not suppressing the grieving part, its energy got to be part of the move forward. When we suppress something, we're not playing with all the cards in our deck. We're not able to move forward as effectively if anything's suppressed. It's kind of like I'm trained in Okinawa and Goju-ryu. It's kind of martial arts. So if you were throwing the punches and the kicks, where do you think my arms would be? But see, if my arms are up here, I might miss something. My arms are at my sides. I'm open. As soon as you so much as move a shoulder or a hip, I know high block, low block, it's automatic because my body knows how to respond as soon as any movement is detected. And if we walk around in our lives open, we're more effective. We respond more effectively and more quickly to things because we're not doing this. Most of the time, we're so hyper vigilant. We're like this, and we miss half of what's in front of us. You know.
It's so true, because you can't see when you're doing this.
No,
you can't see anything.
And we see everything through our filters. It's like I had a situation a number of years ago. The car was in the shop getting the tires put on for the winter. So I'm down at the bus stop, and there's this fellow there. And he starts to talk to me with lots of swear words. He's very angry about how the last bus driver took him to the wrong stop and he missed his appointment with his parole officer. And if the next driver takes him to the wrong stop, he's going to smash a window on the bus. And I'm looking at him like, wow, what an interesting reflection of my inner masculine this is. So I'm just soft and open and listening. I made one comment when he talked about breaking a window on the bus. I did say that might not yield the results you're looking for. But other than that, I just stayed open and listened. And the most interesting thing happened. He would swear up a storm, and then he'd stop and he'd look at me and go, I'm sorry, I'm swearing. And then he'd swear some more and stop and go, I'm sorry, I'm swearing. Now, I've said nothing about his use of invective, but I suspect this gentleman's reality was that he either gets a wall or a pushback. People ignore him or they push back. Don't talk to me, don't swear at me. And here was his feminine reflection, just soft and open and listening. So for moments at a time, he could see his harshness and even apologize for it. It was a strong pattern, it kept running, but he could catch it for moments at a time. Now, whether he had any revelations after that, I don't know, and it's none of my business, but I spent a few years contemplating what part of me is so defensive and angry and thinks the world is against it. And how do I access and work with that part of me? Everybody who shows up in my reality, I see as a reflection of some part of myself. And that's part of the shadow work. We can either say, well, I'm glad I'm not like that. Or, well, if they show up in my reality, that must be some reflection of me. How do I find that part internally? And we just get so much more accomplished, I think, when we look at it that way.
No kidding. And think about how much that could soften the world if we all met each other with that kind of openness, rather than, holy crap, you're swearing at me, I'm going to run away, or I'm going to like bash back at you.
Yeah, and I was actually invited at one point to work with women in prison. I lived in Kingston, Ontario, where a number of the prisons are, and it's closed down now, but there was the prison for women. And I remember working with one woman, and I was telling her something, and she said, oh, you say that again, I'm going to hit you. And I looked at her and said, no, you're not. And we both had a good chuckle and continued working together. But I could look at the women there. A lot of them, they were there for violent crimes, but I didn't see the violent person. I saw the 4-year-old whose father used to beat her. I saw the women who'd been battered by the men in their lives. I looked at them, and I didn't have an easy childhood either, and thought, but for the grace of God, there go I. I saw myself in them if I didn't have the choices that I had. So I could empathize and stay connected to them and not react to the external stuff that comes up, which is often a protective mechanism. We put up that bluster because we're vulnerable at that moment, and vulnerability is hard. And if you can gently respond to the bluster, people can take those walls down and really do the work with you. That can be helpful for any coaches, is to look at the people you worked with that day and ask yourself, what reflection of me showed up today? Because I haven't done all that work yet. And the advice I gave them, how do I still need to take that for myself? I think it keeps us honest. It keeps us working on ourselves so we become pure instruments. And we don't fall into the trap with, I'm okay, you're not. Where we're seeing our clients as other and as somehow not on par with our own experience. We're all, as Ram Dass put it, we're all just walking each other home. We're all human beings having the human experience. I once had a client say to me, I'm so screwed up. I said, honey, we all are. We're all working on our stuff. It's just people come to me because I've learned certain things that are helpful for them on their journey. And I keep working on myself and I keep offering what I know so far. And they're going to help people as well. And there are people who have helped me. I've had a mentor I've worked with for 3 decades. So, it's realizing we're all on this journey together, and it keeps you from becoming stale. That's the last thing you want to do, because then you're not truly able to help the people around you.
And sharing what you know so far. I like that, because none of us has all the answers. That's why there's so many of us. That's why we all need to work together, because we can all learn something from everyone who comes across our path, no matter what they look like.
Absolutely. Yeah. And even as, as a coach who's been doing this for over 40 years, I make referrals. Sometimes somebody will want something that I don't have the tool for, or I'll even say, I think you could benefit from this. Go do a few sessions with this person and then come back, because I think they have a piece of the puzzle for you. And they'll come back and go, yeah, I needed that. We really have to put the ego aside. And I think one of the challenges for anybody running a business is it's so easy to compare. They have more followers, they seem more popular, blah, blah, blah. It's such a trap. Instead of trusting you are walking your path, doing what you're here to do, and what other people are doing is none of your business. Yeah. There have been times, because of my unique skill set, I've been offered other opportunities. And I'll always listen. I'll say, yep, let's go for coffee. Let's talk about it. And then I say, thank you. Now I'm going to go home and go intuitive on it. And my ego will go, oh, Benita, you'd be really good at this. And you'd have a lot of fun with it. And you'd make a lot of money doing it. And then I ask that one question, is it my path? And 99% of the time I get told no. It keeps things really simple.
That's a wonderful tool. Is this my path? Because especially now with the internet, there's so many shiny things out there to distract you and pull you in so many different directions. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, like the click funnel thing. So I call it, what I do, I call it spiritual SEO. And this begs into the concept of entanglement. It's a quantum physics principle I think it's the real internet. Everything in the universe is completely hooked up to everything else. When I've done therapeutic touch on somebody's back in England from Canada and they can feel it, that's entanglement. There's really no distance or space. It's what our mind creates. Everything's just this energy all together. So if somebody is drawn to work with me, they're going to know it. They're going to find me. Yes, I have a website. Yes, I have Instagram, and I build websites for my clients. I do all that. But really, if you're working on yourself, people will show up. I once had a fellow call me from Mount Shasta who doesn't have internet, doesn't have a telephone. He came down the mountain, used a payphone to call me because he kept getting my phone number during his meditation. I've had people reach out from Europe who sensed they were to work with someone from Kelowna. And I had just moved there, so I was like 6 pages down on Google. But they found me because they knew it was me they're supposed to work with. There's a karmic bond between us and the people we're here to serve. So do the stuff, but try to do it, I would say, without attachment to a certain outcome. I've held workshops where one person showed up, and that week I ended up with 5 new clients because of referrals from them. You give everything you've got to who shows up, because that's who is supposed to show up. You trust that. Anyway, that's my approach.
It's a beautiful approach, especially, and that's the thing, like, your one person showed up And that was exactly what that one person needed. And then that turned into more business. So often, especially in the online entrepreneur space, you can get caught up in wanting, yeah, the more followers or needing a bigger email list or this or that. But really, what we're supposed to be like, you just show up every day for the work that's in front of you.
Yeah, and be genuine. Like, I haven't done a podcast recently. My last one was my forecast. And right now, because I'm sort of internally gestating, something hasn't come up yet that needs to go on the podcast. I have in the past just done series, but right now it's like when it's time, it'll show. And I get to work with my pattern that goes, I should be doing this all the time. We all have our shoulds, and you get to sit with that. And that's the hard spiritual work. Sometimes we stay busy so we don't get that feeling that's there if we aren't producing. And it's the feeling of I'm not good enough as I am. So sometimes being in hiatus, sitting with yourself and not producing means you get to work on that core pattern. Because a lot of us weren't taught our value as beings, we were taught our value if we were doers. So we get to sit with that, and it's really good sometimes just to get off that wheel as a gerbil and just go, okay, can I just accept myself as I am right now without feeling like I have to be making something happen, which is, in other words, I'm not here to manipulate reality. One can do that. It's called sorcery. It's not recommended, because think of it this way. If you are placing intent that's super specific, you might create that. But was that your path? What if the universe had something more in mind for you, that while you were so busy creating that, you never got to go there? So I think it's really important to place general intent and then surrender. The universe is going to move things around and create certain openings you then step into. For example, years ago, when I was struggling financially, I placed an intent to have a comfortable, affluent life doing the work I love. Now, you notice there's no specifics there as to what comfort, affluence, or even the work looks like. And I surrendered. And the very next day, the universe launched into action, and I got fired from the yoga studio I was teaching at. The universe was like, well, you're spending an awful lot of time there for not much money. It's gone. And it pushed me up against fear of lack, self-doubt, the very patterns I had to work on to have this comfortable, affluent life doing the work I love. So I think it's really important when we place intent, we then surrender, because the way the universe is going to put it together is nothing like what our limited ego consciousness is expecting. And it could take you to a life better than you could possibly ever have imagined for yourself.
I just got chills everywhere. I'm glad you highlighted that the process might not look the way you think it will.
Mm-hmm. The universe will often first remove an object and then push you up against the patterns, because all real change is from the inside out. So if you try to change something out here, but you don't make the change internally, your patterns are doomed to keep recreating the scenario that was going on when the pattern was created. It's not conscious. It still thinks it's that 4-year-old with no say in what's going on around it. It has no idea it's in an adult body. It has no idea it has agency. And I've developed tools to help people access those parts and basically reparent them, work with them directly to help them to consciousness. And, people will say to me, oh, I've done inner child work. And I'll say, oh, yeah? What'd your inner child tell you? What do you mean? Because they haven't actually consulted their inner children and let them communicate. It's a whole other world when you do that, right?
It is. Oh my gosh. And I think it was at Mountain Spirit Festival, you led a meditation that had us connect with our inner child and go really deep inside, and then allow the inner child to come back up and look through your adult eyes. Bonita, that started me on this wild journey of healing and just coming into more alignment with my inner child. I like bawled my eyes out during that process.
Well, I'm almost ready to cry. I'm so touched that that had such an effect on you. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, it really did. So, anyone who's watching, if you're feeling called to work with Benita, I highly recommend it. You're just, I'm so, I'm so grateful that I know you and that I get to just be in your sphere because it's really had a positive impact on me and big time.
Aw. Vanessa, you've totally made my day, and I'm so touched. It's so beautiful to hear when one has had an impact because I tend not to focus that on. It's just on to the next thing. What am I supposed to do now? So that's really lovely, and I know that this is the trickle down effect that all of us on the planet who are awakening help others to come to greater awareness, and then they help others, and this accelerated evolutionary process that I believe we're in of awakening is something we all get to be part of. And it's really humbling and beautiful. And you're such a beautiful soul. And I'm so tickled that we're practically neighbors and I get to see you.
I know.
So thank you for that. And I miss those events. So coming to the island where there's so much of the spiritual here, it's like coming back to what the interior was like when I first got there in 2011. So it's been really delightful.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, I want to get out for more things like that. Mm. Or I'm just like, I'm all glowy after like remembering that whole experience. Would you say that a lot of what's in our shadow is our inner child?
I would say, in a sense, yes, because when you're a little kid and something happens beyond your control, patterns develop. So, for example, you might have a part that's really scared and vulnerable, and you develop this warrior that stands in front of it. But the warrior can only come out where it's safe for it to. So, a lot of my work with people, I'm working with people maybe in their 50s, 60s, 70s who can finally show their warrior and have it be given respect and not be told to suppress it. So, different parts come up for different reasons. And I will sometimes I'll say to that person, tell me off, yell at me, swear at me, let this part up there. I can't do that. Yes, you can. That part wants to. And as it does, there's this glow because all that energy has been released. And after sometimes half a dozen sessions where they've done that, the warrior will step aside and let me see the frightened 4-year-old that's been protecting for 60 years. So there's all these different parts with different roles, but all your subconscious patterns are designed to protect you based on what was happening in your life when the pattern first developed. So once those patterns become conscious, they become discerning. The anger becomes a part of you that's able to set boundaries, be clear with people, communicate, and take action on the things that are important to you. It becomes a very constructive part of you, a part of you that might have pulled your energy back and sat in judgment. Human beings at 10 o'clock shields up because maybe you got humiliated as a child. That's something that happened to me. That part can become the part that's just discerning, that says everything in this room looks pretty kosher, but there's a situation over there you just might want to be aware of. It's now not running a blanket pattern. It's giving you some of your wisdom. All those parts, once they're conscious, have some of your wisdom. So I would say they're very much child parts, but they could be teenage parts. They could be 20-year-old parts. It depends on when the traumas in your life happened. So when I run people through the exercise, often the part that comes up is quite young. Not always. Sometimes it's older.
Interesting. Wow. Oh, our minds are so fascinating. People are so fascinating. And that's always something that I've loved when I sit across from someone is just seeing the layers because all of us have so many layers and it's so beautiful. And I think we're at a point now where so many people are waking up and starting to realize, what they've been playing into, the patterns that
Yeah.
they've created. and wanting change. So
Hmm.
I think these conversations are really important to have.
Well, it's like God, I used to love it when Elizabeth would hold her events, Mountain Spirit and the big fair in Kamloops. I God bless Alara. She's still keeping it going in Kelowna and Vernon. I think Penticton as well. But there were so many great opportunities to awaken together and just in community, and it was so beautiful. So I'm really happy to continue in community here as well. I like what Walt Whitman said. He said, "I am large. I contain multitudes." We are so faceted. And when you do this exercise of going inward and you keep doing it, I always say go in with beginner's mind, because maybe this time you'll encounter the 5 year old or the 10 year old or the 11 year old or maybe a different 5 year old, depending on how many aspects of you had to show up to help you live your life. So when I'm working with people who've gone through a lot of childhood trauma, I'm not a big believer in you have to remember it to heal from it. I think that often re-traumatizes and reinforces patterns. So if a memory comes up, sure, we're going to hold space for it. We're going to work through it. But it's really just looking at what parts developed as coping mechanisms and how can we support them now? Because say, for example, you were at 4 years old, you reached for love and validation and you got indifference or abuse. That part of you is now designed to look for love and validation from people who will ignore or abuse it, thinking if I can get this person who can't love me to love me, I'll be healed. And so we end up in a vicious cycle of poor relationships or work decisions, or boundary setting, because that part is running unconsciously. So the person it most needs to love and validate it is us, the adult version, who can say, I'm here for you. I love you. I'm going to support you. Tell me what you need. And over time, the more we do that, children need repetition. They start to believe it. They start to feel seen, heard, and cared for. They start to integrate that. And then they're not craving it from other people. But if it genuinely comes along, that love and high regard, they can let it in. They're no longer going, I don't deserve that. I can't have that.
Wow. Sorry, I feel like I just listened, like my whole being was listening to that and absorbing that.
I love that you say that, because a lot of times when I'm in my office or on Zoom with my clients, because I work worldwide as well, I will consciously communicate with certain parts of them with their permission and say, okay, let's let up this part. You sit back, let that part come forward, and I'll communicate with it. And sometimes it's a very young part. And it can be really interesting because their feelings, their fears are often very different from the adult. And it's so interesting how an adult will say, oh, yeah, I have a perfectly fine relationship with my parents. And then as we get working on it, they resolve things. I'll say, your 5 year old never got to be part of that conversation. They're still struggling. And I call them the children under the stairs, because they're sort of tucked away there for their safety in the dark. But nobody ever opened the door and said, it's a different world now. So sometimes you got to open the door and go sit in the dark with them and get to know them before they're even ready to open that door and to see the bigger world that's waiting for them. So we have to be patient and loving and hold space for them.
Wow. You are such a gift.
Thank you.
Oh my goodness.
I'm just me doing my thing.
I love it. I feel like it's crazy. I feel like I just had a session with you. And it's so funny because I feel like my body and my spirit were listening and absorbing so much that I didn't process words, if that makes sense.
Yes. A lot of times when I'm working with people, they will experience an internal shift because I am communicating with all the layers, that they'll come away and go, "Oh, I'm now experiencing that differently." I'm also an advanced Psych-K facilitator. So when I'm doing Psych-K, quite often there will be a dramatic shift because I'm doing it with my psychic abilities as well. And as I'm communicating these truths on a deeper level, people resonate, they feel it, and they start to orient toward that paradigm of seeing things in a more expanded way. So there's a natural evolutionary process that's occurring while we're working together.
That's so cool.
Not all shifts have to necessarily happen here. In fact, I remember my mentor, I hadn't dated for a while during COVID. I dated a few times, but always had a sense, oh, they're going to get COVID. I better stop dating them. They get COVID after I started dating them. And so I wasn't dating for a while. And my mentor and his partner came for a visit, and he said, you need to get out there again. But he recommended that I do this thing where every day I ask myself, what do I need to know to walk my path? What do I need to do? And I'm used to getting verbal messages and visions and stuff like that. All I was getting was churning, but I did it every day. Anytime I had an opportunity, I'd ask those questions. I just sit in that limbic space and I churn and I churn, and nothing was coming to conscious realization. And after 2 weeks of this, it's like I woke up one morning. It was like the sun was brighter. I felt like I'd been shot out of a cannon, because during those 2 weeks, my energy got quieter. I had less and less energy to externalize because I was doing such deep internal work. So that morning when I woke up and felt like I'd been shot out of a cannon, it's like something has shifted. I don't know what, but something has shifted. And within a few weeks, I met my husband and my whole life changed. So,
Wow.
so the internal work, you won't always get a conscious message. And we have to be wary as people in the spiritual, doing the spiritual work, that we don't get attached to having a McVision. You know, you have some amazing experience when you meditate, and then you're meditating, trying to get to that amazing experience. That's attachment, and that's a trap. Or wanting something to happen right away. I often say, if you're bored, you're finally starting to do the work, because boredom is your ego going, oh, this is boring. We could be doing other things. Why are we doing this? Because it knows if you stay with it long enough and go deep enough, you're going to have a realization, and it thinks it's going to die, and it does not want you to go there. So,
Unreal.
little tidbit.
I'm so glad we're having this conversation, because it will give people permission to just be in that liminal space and not feel the need to constantly be doing, moving, producing.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the biggest problems with Western society is we are designed to create that gross national product. It's drummed in us from early childhood. Get out there and produce. You got kids that are in every kind of lesson imaginable. So I spent half my childhood up a tree making mud pies and bringing home snakes. You know, yeah, I had ballet lessons and stuff, but I was allowed some unorchestrated childhood. We had 10 acres of woods behind us. First day, I'm 8 years old. My mom's out back with a flashlight trying to find me because I'm gone. I'm exploring, right? I would end up miles down the road out in somebody else's farm property, finding my way home. That wildness, that exploration that allows our natural consciousness to surface doesn't get to if everything's orchestrated, which is why, yeah, guided meditations are nice, but I think it's really important that we also learn just to sit with our breath and with our feelings. I don't know if you've ever done the 10-day Vipassana retreat. I did the one near Merritt.
I know, I want to, though.
Oh, it's amazing. I remember on the first day after our orientation, when the bell went, we were to be silent for 10 days. And I've done guided, like I've done 4-day silent retreats and stuff. I had this moment of panic, like, oh my God, what did I sign up for? Because it was like, this is going to be deep. And they teach you how to feel every physical sensation, every emotion, every subtle energy with equanimity. I can't stress strongly enough how important that is, because we know in Buddhism we suffer through attachment and aversion. Oh, this feels so good. I want to keep feeling this. Oh, this feels awful. I want that to stop now. And because we have no tolerance for letting go of things and just letting the whole of life experience move through us, we suffer. So when you can be in a state of, oh, this is joy. Oh, this is pain. I'm having an experience. You stop suffering because life just moves through you and you're the observer. It's not detachment, which is not feeling. It's non-attachment, which is feeling everything, but not clinging to any of it or giving it a story like, oh, this is going to last forever. How do I get rid of this? So a lot of times when people come to me and they go, I'm looking to release, I'm looking to get rid of, I say, we're going to do integration instead, because all of you is valuable and necessary to your journey, including the parts that are hurting. So I hope you get to do it because it's so cool.
Oh, it's on my list.
And there were times where it's like, my knees hurt, I'm bored, I'm sad, I'm angry, I'm happy. Like, it's just everything, right? They're cooking in the next room, and oh my God, I feel tortured because it smells so good. I'm not going to eat for the next 20 minutes, you know? All the human experiences.
Oh man. I don't know why that just reminded me of that movie Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Yeah, yeah, right?
Because when it's that quiet, it's like everything gets amplified.
Yes. And we're so sure that our feelings are going to destroy us, and they will transform us, and it might feel like a kind of ego death, because shadow work means accepting the things about yourself you don't want to see. Do I have time to give you a quick example?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. So I was at a 4-day yoga retreat. I managed to sprain my ankle badly the day before, so I couldn't do any of the yoga classes. So it's the last day of the retreat, and I'm sitting cross-legged, eyes cast down on the floor, meditating. Everybody has left for the beautiful yoga studio right on the edge of a lake with floor to ceiling windows looking out at the lake. And the yoga instructor is the last person to leave. I see her feet go by me. And remember, it's a silent retreat. So I didn't have the opportunity to cover up my feelings by going, have a nice class, because that's what we do. Okay. So I'm sitting there and all this resentment comes up. You all get to do yoga and I don't. So I'm sitting with this resentment. And because I'm just sitting and having the experience of it, when, we know from quantum physics, the mere act of observation creates a material change. It shifted. And I got the memory back of being 2 years old and having to leave my family. I had German measles. My mother was pregnant with my little brother. If she caught it from me, I could have had a deformed little brother. So I had to go live next door, and all I could do is wave through the picture window, from the family I was staying with at my family. And of course, by the time I get home, not long after, there's another kid in the picture. So this 2-year-old comes up fully resenting and feeling sad about her situation she does not understand. And I was able to let her all the way up and say, and let her see. That was circumstance. It wasn't done to you, but it couldn't be helped. Today, this is circumstance. I have a sprained ankle. Nobody's rejecting me going to the yoga studio. It can't be helped. So it was a neat, and this is the thing, the universe keeps giving us moments similar to the ones we had before. So those parts can come up and become awakened and heal. So pay attention to moments where you have a much stronger reaction than the moment actually calls for. It's usually a core pattern piggybacking on the current moment, trying to wake up.
Okay.
Your reactions, Vanessa, you tell me.
I feel like this is just like puzzle piece, puzzle piece, puzzle piece.
Oh, this has been so much fun. I so appreciate you having me on today. It's just lovely to get the time with you.
Right. I'm so grateful for this whole conversation and your energy and your wisdom. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Benita.
Oh my God, thank you. It's such a pleasure, and I'm looking forward to another walk on the beach with you. And we have to plan for that.
Definitely.